So Vitrasura's prayers continued, or not prayers, statements of encouragement to Indra. So far, he's been asking Indra to analyze his situation according to, with reference to the first cause of things, which is God. For example, if you have a cup that is supported by a table, but the table is itself supported by the foundation of the building, but the foundation of the building is ultimately supported by the earth. So the earth is the first cause, and the source power from which all the other objects derive their ultimate power. If the earth wasn't there, then the table wouldn't have the power to hold anything, or the foundation wouldn't have the power to hold anything. And then the table itself wouldn't have the power to hold anything. So the earth is the real cause of the support or foundation of everything by analogy. So similarly, God, he was been saying that it's the time factor that causes victory and defeat. For time, ordinarily understood, is that which causes the change in gunas. And the way the gunas change around us is according to our karma, right? So just like Krishna says, the gunas are always vying for supremacy in the Gita. But how a particular guna becomes predominantly influential in our life at one point or another is according to our karma. So time is that what causes the gunas to change, and how the gunas change around us, that's due to the time factor. But the ultimate support of the time factor is God, because God is the first cause of everything. So we've been asked by Vishwasura to consider our situation from the perspective of the first cause. Our dilemma is that we usually consider the situation only from the perspective of as using Srila Sridhar Maharaj's language, a provincial cause, instead of the universal cause or the first cause, which is the Supreme Lord. And so our provincial interests clash with the universal interest, and we become bewildered. So there's this nice article by Srila Sridhar Maharaj called What is Maya? It's not an article, but an excerpt from his teachings is taken and put in the article format, called What is Maya? Everyone should read that article. Very nice article. I'm just now remembering as I'm speaking. So yeah, our provincial interests clash with the universal interests, and we become bewildered, and this is Maya. But if we are to look at our suffering from the perspective of the first cause, then we may gain insight into the ultimate value of we may gain insight into the ultimate value of what's right before our eyes. We may discover the meaning of what's right before our eyes by consideration of the situation from the perspective of the first cause. And one of the names of God is meaning, Artha, right? Artha is one of the names for God. Sometimes we add the qualifier Parama Artha. So Paramartha. Otherwise, the word Artha is itself a name for God also. He is called as the Artha. He's the true meaning of everything. And so obviously for Gaudiya Vaishnavas, the highest reach of meaning is the discovery of Swayam Bhagavan Shri Krishna. That is the highest extent of the reach of meaning. But if you consider meaning as existing on a holarchy, a word that you should all be familiar with now because I've been using it a lot more, then maybe even at the lowest mark of the holarchy is a discovery of just the meaning of your life, the meaning of your suffering. It's not exactly the discovery of Swayam Bhagavan Shri Krishna, but it is a discovery of God because God is meaning. And said in the converse, when there's a collapse of meaning, souls descend into the cesspool of nihilism and they drown and die. And it doesn't matter if they're rich or poor, this is happening everywhere. They have lost the meaning of things and they're descending into nihilism and their lives are being finished because of this. So it is God ultimately that gives value to life because he is the artha, he is the meaning. So far, Vitrasura has encouraged us to consider our circumstances from the perspective of the first cause, not the immediate cause. And that consideration gives insight to the artha, the meaning of the immediate causes and what it means ultimately for us externally and also internally. Okay, so he continues his instructions here. So we left off on verse number 13, I believe. Yeah. Ayushri kirta aishwaryam ashisha purushashayah bhavante vahitat kale yatani chor viparyayah. So just as a person not inclined to die must nonetheless give up his longevity, opulence, fame, and everything else at that time of death. So at the appointed time of victory, one can gain all these when the Supreme Lord awards them by his mercy. I don't know why Prabhupada translates it as a person not inclined to die. Anyway, yata anicca viparyaya. So anicca means one not desiring. So not desiring what? Viparya means a reversal in life. So four items are given here. Ayu, Shri, Kirta, Aishwarya. So Ayu means life. So the reversal of life is death. Shri means opulence. So the reversal of that is poverty. Kirti means fame. So the reversal of that is infamy. And Aishwarya means the wealth or power translated here. So the reversal of that is weakness. So yata nichor viparya. So just as one does not desire the reversals of these four, ashisha purushashyaha, these four benedictions in life. Bhavante vahitat kale, but they nonetheless come at the proper time. So in the same way, the idea is in the same way, one's auspiciousness will come at the right time. Bhavante vahitat kale. So they bhavanti means they arrive. Eva, certainly they arrive. Tat kale, at the right time. Because he's been speaking about time factor. And also God as the ultimate foundation of the time factor. So at the right time, there is victory. And at another time, there is the reversal of that. So there is defeat. And these factors have nothing to do with us, ultimately. I mean, as far as they're outside of our power, ultimately, to stop or to what's the opposite of stop? Go. To oblige. This is Krishna saying this thing in Gita. He's describing in context the unfolding and enfolding of the universes in chapter 9. So he describes how at the end of the Kalpa, then there's an enfolding of creation into the Paramatma, right, to Mahavishnu. And then at the beginning of a new Kalpa, there's the unfolding of the creation, right? The unfolding out of Paramatma of the creation. And then he says the living entities are helplessly moved by this process. Pakriter Abhishay. What is that? Pakrita Abhishay? I'm forgetting the Sanskrit. I haven't quoted this verse in ages. Helplessly, they're moved by the unfolding and enfolding of the cosmos from Paramatma. And how it unfolds is according to their karma. So helplessly, they're moved by this process, like seaweed, helplessly moved by the waves of the ocean. And there's no way to resist that. So also, the ways of time, they give Ayushri, Kritir Aishwarya. The same ways of time will remove that. And that is beyond our power. So there is no point in lamenting about it or wasting time being in anxiety about it. Time wasted and anxiety about these things would be better spent and, with the mind on something else, like Krishna. This is also Krishna's first instruction in the Bhagavad Gita. Ashocana vashochas tvam pragavadam shabashashe gati cha anushocanti pandita. Siddhahari, I think you have to mute your computer. state. I don't have the power to do it. Okay. So Ashocha Bhagavatam Shabasha said, you're lamenting for that which is not worthy of lamentation. But you're speaking like a man with pragya, with the wisdom, but you're lamenting like a Shudra. Those who are pundits, learned, they don't lament for the living or the dying. This, of course, is because they know that the soul is different from matter. So this is going to be Vitrasura's next point. This is one reason they lament. And they also know that these forces of nature are beyond our control. So there's no use in lamenting about it. Rather, we have to learn how to respond to it. So that is, life is about that, responsiveness. Ultimately, what is bhakti? Bhakti is loving responsiveness to God, right? That is what bhakti is, loving responsiveness to God. So even if God is coming in the future as some reversal in life, then bhakti also is about loving responsiveness to that also. So that is a big message of the Srimad Bhagavatam before you get to the 10th canto. Parikshit Maharaj's verse is very, nice in this regard, where he describes the curse as a form of Bhagavan. Krishna has kindly come before me in the form of a curse of a Brahmin boy, so that I will renounce and break my attachment to the material way of life. So it was a loving response to that, to God. So no use in lamenting about things we can't change, basically. We have to learn how to respond to it. And bhakti is loving responsiveness to God, because the devotee is seeing God's hand behind everything. So he's lovingly responding to that. So this is an art, obviously, not very easily learned. So the next verse, tasmat, therefore, so it's kind of like a concluding statement. Tasmat akirti yashasor jaya paja yayor api samasya sukaduka abhyam mrityu jivitayostata. Since everything is dependent on the supreme will of the personality of Godhead, one should be equipoised in fame and defamation, victory and defeat, life and death, and their effects represented as happiness and distress. One should maintain oneself in equilibrium without anxiety. So he gives a list of dualities here: fame, defamation, victory, defeat, happiness, distress, life, and death. And his instruction to Indra is that we have to learn how to become sama. So sama means seeing them with the equal eye. Narayana parasarve nakutashana bibhiti. I quoted this verse last time. Swarga apavarga nanakeshu apito yarta dharshina. So the devotees of Lord Narayana, they have no fear. And they look upon Swarga and liberation and also hell, all with the equal eye. Tuya arta, they see with darshina, they see with equal eye. They see what the seva has to be done, what response has to be there. That is the sama of the devotee. And if you're a little bit more Gani type, then sama. You just see these are just the material forces moving around, and therefore sama, I shall have equal vision. So this sama is in contemporary times, they would refer to this quality as stoicism, which is getting a sort of a revival amongst the consciousness of the self-help world, particularly. People are really into how the Stoics think and so on. So it's not a very new idea or Greek idea. The Stoicism was always taught there in the ancient Vedic culture. So this is a secret for, this is the advice given by Vitrasura. We have to be sama in the face of duality. So sama doesn't mean not doing anything, but sama means not reacting, but just responding to the dualities presented before you. Not allowing the mind to dwell on that which is beyond your control, but rather allowing the mind to go to invest where control is possible. So basically, you have the most control in your attitude towards your situation. That's where you have most control. Although it doesn't feel that way often when you're in an emotional, reactive state. But that's where you actually have the most control in your attitude towards your suffering or your dualities. And then from there, there'll be a limited control of what you can do in response to the situation. So we're being advised like this by Vitrusura. We should be sama, so equal. Again, meaning not allowing the mind to dwell in that which is beyond your control, or allowing the mind to invest in that which is in your control, which is largely your attitude, and a little bit the few actions that you may be able to take in response to any particular given situation. Next verse, Sattvam Rajastamariti Pakritir Natmano Gunaha Tatra Sakshinamatmanam Yoveda Sadnabhadyate. So one who knows that the three qualities, goodness, passion, and ignorance, are not qualities of the soul, but qualities of material nature, but who knows that the pure soul is simply an observer of the actions and reactions of these qualities, should be understood to be a liberated person. He is not bound by these qualities. So he's saying that all dualities are ultimately composed of the three gunas of nature. Sattvam Rajas Tamariti, Pakritir Natmanoguna. So all the reversals in life, all dualities in this world, they are composed of the three gunas of Pakriti. Na Atmanaha, and the spirit soul is not composed of these three qualities. So we are different from the three qualities of nature. Tatra Sakshinam Atmana, we are the witness of the three qualities. So one who can be self-situated means situated in his own nature as a witness, and not as the, what's the opposite of the witness? Witnessed with the ED. It's probably a better word than that. That would sound a little bit more poetic. In any case, being self-situated, meaning seeing oneself, not seeing oneself, but having the awareness of oneself as the witness and not as the witnessed, being the plaything in the hands of dualities. Then for such a person who knows this, Yavhedaha, one who knows this, he, saha, he, nabhatite, is not bound. So obviously the lack of bondage is actually constitutional. The soul is never in bondage, but when he thinks, the soul can never be bound or be liberated in the ontological sense because he's always beyond matter. So these terms are used to refer to the bewilderment of the soul when he looks upon himself as the witnessed instead of the witness of the phenomena of nature. But one who knows himself, I guess the word here, beta, knows doesn't mean theoretical, because we all know that, but we're still quite bewildered. So Veda here means a self-awareness, an awareness of one's ontological self as the witness of nature. Then he is not bound. Not bound means not disturbed by the play of duality, seeing himself as ultimately different from that. Okay, next verse. And then he gives his own self as an example. I think this is the last of Vitrusura speaking here. Pashyamam nirjitam shatru rikna yuda bhujam ridhe gattamanam yata shakti tava prana jihirshaya. Oh, my enemy, just look at me. Pashyamam, just look at me. I have already been defeated, for my weapon and arm have been cut to pieces. You have already overwhelmed me, but nonetheless, with the desire to kill you, I'm trying my best to fight. I am not at all morose, even under such adverse conditions. Therefore, you should give up your moroseness and continue fighting. So, Pashamam, just look at me. I'm the best example of what I'm speaking about. That's what he's saying. I'm the best example of what I'm speaking about. Nirjitam Shatru, oh enemy, Indra, I'm already defeated by you. with your weapon, you have already cut out my arm in this fight. My sword and my arm has already been removed because of your thunderbolt weapon. Still, Gatamanam Yata Shakti. Yata Shakti, according to my Shakti, according to my capacity at this particular moment. Gatamanam, I'm still trying, according to my Shakti. Tava Prana Jihirshaya, with the desire to take away your life because they're fighting to the death. So I'm still trying according to my Shakti. So he's saying here that I'm the best example of what I'm speaking. That although I'm clearly defeated in this situation, I have a duty to perform. And my duty in this case is to try to take away your life. That is the duty of the situation. I'm trying to take away your life. And that I'm continuing to try to do according to my Shakti, my power in this particular moment, even though I'm clearly defeated. So he's showing how the application of what he's speaking, although externally there's no question of success, he has not become morose because of his absorption and his responsiveness to the situation. That's what we're trying to say here. Again, life is about, when you're dealing with forces beyond your control, the only thing you can do is learn how to respond to that. So you're not be able to control it. And how are you going to respond to that? Largely means how are you going to respond internally? So he's saying I'm a very good example of this internal response. I allow myself to look upon all eventualities with an equal eye, considering only what is the seva to be done at that particular moment. And according to that moment, trying to render that seva according to my Shakti capacity at that time. In this way, one can or should pass through life without being despondent. It's very interesting. Devotees were quite familiar with these instructions, but when we go through a difficult situation, somehow we don't want to hear these things. But these are the things that will help us. So we have to learn how to appreciate these sorts of instructions when we're actually going through it. In any case, it's good to hear them when you're in a more peaceful state of mind. Observe the idea. And then when life happens to you, don't say, yeah, I know all this, but. As soon as you say like that but prevents you from accessing the freedom that is this sort of knowledge and instruction. Simply disregarding the actual means and then choosing some other means that will likely add to your suffering. The remedy for their dukkha is itself dukkha. Atadiyaham, because they keep fixing their intelligence, they're thinking about things according to the body. Atat. They keep looking at it from the body concept of like Bhumam Brahmami. Therefore, they wander in this world like this, adding pain to pain. They don't want to hear these instructions. Therefore, O Bhagavan, you please instruct me about your Dasa Yoga. I need to learn how to lovingly respond to you in all your various forms, including your forms of reversals in life, or your forms of duality, if you will. How to dance with you in that form also. Well, he gave the analogy earlier. We're all like puppets in the hands of God, and we need to learn how to dance. So, Gatamanam Yata Shakti. According to our power, we should try. Prabhupada's added the sense here that we should not be morose. So that is a common message for dealing with reversals. Arjuna, the whole message of Gita is framed around lamentation, right? First words of Bhagavad Gita, Ashochan, Avashochastvam. Last instruction of Gita, Mashuchaha. So they're from the same word, Ashochan, Avashochastvam, Shuchaha. So the whole instruction of Gita, they're bookend by this message of lamentation. You're lamenting for that which is not worthy of lamentation. That's his first statement. And his last statement, don't lament. And in between, the instructions of Gita are coming. So Vitrasura's instructions like instructions of Gita also. So they're meant to be a solution to the lamentation problem. So we should allow ourselves to hear them. Okay, This is the last verse here. He gives an analogy describing their circumstance. Pranaglahoyam samara ikshaksho vahanasana atra nagyanyate mushya jayo musha parajaya. Oh, my enemy, consider this battle a gambling match. Ayam samara. So this battlefield that we're on is like a gambling match. Well, what's the stake? What's at stake here? In which our lives are the stakes. Pranaglaha. Okay. The arrows are the dice, and the animals acting as carriers are the game board. No one can understand who will be defeated and who will be victorious. It all depends on providence. That is added here. So carry on in this game of life with equal mind. It's out of your hand. And only thing you can really steady is your inner world. That's it. And the rest of things is out of, just like when you're playing sports. I think it's an interesting analogy. When you play sports, oftentimes, I mean, because I was an athlete in high school. I played several sports in high school. Chess also, which isn't a sport, but the same principle applies. You often sabotage yourself when you're afraid before the game starts. It's often like a self-sabotaging principle. And I had this experience a lot playing chess. When I would start the game, I would be so nervous to make like a bad move, you know, and you just like keep psyching yourself out. You're overthinking things and you're just so nervous to make a bad move. And then I would have this distinct feeling like when I would make a really bad move, I would like calm down. I was like, okay, I just jacked up the game. It's over, you know? And I would like relax after I was like, nah, I just made a blunder. Once they see the blunder, I'm going to really start losing. And I would like completely relax. And then after I relaxed, I was able to play so much better. And I would often win a lot of losing games just because I was super relaxed, because I was like, anyway, I'm losing, doesn't even matter. I'll just play it out to the end. And but I would be like super calm and relaxed. And I would somehow become empowered by that relaxed. This is the secret to happiness. And less investment in the actual game itself and more investment in what's happening internally with you. And once I was able to adjust myself internally, then suddenly I was able to play much better in the outside thing. So this analogy is apropos in this regard. Who can say who will be the winner, who will be the loser in this game of life? That you cannot say. That is in the hands of a power outside of ourselves. As far as the power within ourselves, that is the power to steady our inner world. So that you should invest in. That should be where the investment goes. Thus ends Vitrasura's statements. So Sri Shukadev Goswami says, hearing the straightforward, instructive words of Vitrasura, King Indra praised him and again took the thunderbolt in his hand. Without bewilderment or duplicity, he then smiled and spoke to Vitrasura as follows. So it says here that, Prabhupada comments here that at first he was astonished to, how is a demon speaking like this? Demons don't talk like this. So he is at first astonished, and then he smiled. So Prabhupada's, both Prabhupada, Sri Vishnu's commentary, they say, the reason he smiled is because he remembered Bali Maharaj, he remembered Prahlad Maharaj, and others who were born in demonic families but exhibited great devotion. And so he's like, yeah, even if you have a demon body or a demon birth, you can still be a great devotee, remembering Prahlad and others. And so he began smiling, and then he begins to praise Vitrasura. So here are his statements of praise, few verses here. Aho dhanavasiddhosi yasyate matiridrishi bhakta sarvatmanatmanam suridam jagadishwaram. O great demon, aho dhanavasiddhosi, I see by your discrimination and endurance in devotional service, despite your dangerous position, that you are a perfect devotee of the Supreme Personality of God, the Super Soul and friend of everyone. So he says here clearly, Aho Dhanava, so, oh demon, aho, I'm astonished. What is the astonishment? Siddho asi. I say you are siddha. You are perfected devotee of the Lord. Yasyate mate idrishi. Idrishi means I can see this by your consciousness, by what you're speaking. I can see this, that you're a perfect, you attain siddha, siddhi, perfection. What is that perfection? Bhakta sarvatmanatmana. You are a bhakta who is sarvatmana. You've given your entire atma, your body, your mind, your words, your everything to the super soul, who is a friend and Lord of the universe. So, bhakta, you are a bhakta. I can see this. You are a perfect bhakta. Next verse. Bhavan atarshamayam vai vaishnavim janamohinem yavihaya suram bhavam mahapurushatam gataha. You have surmounted the illusory energy of Lord Vishnu. And because of this liberation, you have given up the demonic mentality and have attained the position of an exalted devotee. So, Bhavan Atarshan Mayam Vai Vaishnavim Janamohinam. You have crossed beyond Maya, the Maya of the Lord, Vaishnavim, the Maya of Vishnu, which bewilders all souls, Janamohinam. Because of this, Yaviha Yasuram Bhavam, the Asuram Bhavam Vihaya, you've given it up. Mahapurushatam Gata, and you've attained the position of a great soul. So if you haven't gone beyond Maya Shakti, then the Asuram Bhavam is as much a part of you as Hiranyakashipu. Facts. That we heard also in the beginning of the 6th canto. The Vishnu Dutas inquire from Yamadutas. They said, who in this world is deserving of punishment? That was the question. Yamadutas gave answer, everyone. What? Why everyone? Because everyone is acting under the influence of gunas. So if they're in Sattva guna, they're all right. But when they get into the Rajas and Tamaguna, then they act naughty. And at that time, they get to be punished, or they're deserving to be punished. So as long as you have not crossed beyond Maya, then we're as punishable as anyone else. That's a fact. Only when you've crossed beyond Maya, then you can give up this Asuram Bhavam. The Asuram Bhavam, which tries to be the enjoyer of everything. So you've given it up, you've become a great soul because you've crossed beyond Maya. And obviously crossing beyond Maya is only possible by devotional service. Krishna says that twice emphatically in the Bhagavad Gita, 7:14. And also 7:26. Oh, wow, 14:26 Bhagavad Gita. Mam chayo avyapicharena bhakti yogena sevate sabunan samati yaita brahmabuya kalpate. Prabhupada has in the purport here, he quotes this famous verse from Shukadeva Goswami's Mangalcharan in the beginning of the 2nd canto, that if you take shelter of one who is taking shelter of the Lord, then you can cross beyond, you become purified and can cross beyond Maya. So those who are sheltered in the bhaktas, then they can have this power, and they can give up the Asuram Bhava. All right, next verse. Kalvida Maharashtrayam Yaraja Pakriti Vasudeve Bhagavati Satatmani Dridhamati. O Vitrasura, demons are generally conducted by the mode of passion. Ya Raja Pakriti. Therefore, what a great wonder it is that although you are a demon, you have adopted the mentality of a devotee and have fixed your mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva, who is always situated in pure goodness. So Mahat Ashtaryam means this is greatly astonishing. So again, he's astonished. At first he said he was astonished, then he wasn't, because he's like, yeah, even demons can become devotees. But he was thinking of demons like Prahlad Maharaj. And the cause of Prahlad Maharaj's devotion is Narada Muni. When he was in the womb of his mother, Kayadu, so she heard Bhagavad Tattva from Narada Muni, and Prahlad also heard that. And so that was the cause of his great bhakti. But Indra was not able to ascertain the cause of Vitrasura's bhakti. As far as they know, he took birth from the fire yagya. So what was the cause of his great bhakti? That he does not know. So again, he expresses astonishment. Maharashtraryam is in this context. because now he couldn't think, what could be the cause of such great devotion to such a person like this? Of course, it is the same Narada Muni. Of course, if you don't know it is Narada Muni, then you should assume it is Narada Muni. That is the point. There must be some Narada Muni in this person's life, otherwise how it's possible. Jiva Goswami, in writing in the Bhakti Sandarbha, he speaks about the devotion of Pingala. You know Pingala, she was a prostitute. So one night she was, out doing the business and no business was coming. So then she decides, what is this nonsense? And she just starts offering these great prayers to the Supreme Lord, like amazing prayers. And then she's like, becomes detached from everything and goes to become, worshiper of Bhagavan, deep worshiper of Bhagavan. So it is not saying in the description that she had any sadhu sangha. So Jiva Goswami comments about this in Bhakti Sundar, that it should be assumed. Because bhakti our potential for bhakti can only be actualized by sadhu sangha. Or you could say by bhakti in the form of sadhu sangha. Just as the coffee, if you have coffee or tea, hot coffee or tea, it has the potential to become cold. But that potential is actualized by the atmosphere, which is cold, and cooling it down, right? It is not that it just becomes cold suddenly, but it becomes cold. That coldness potential is actualized by the cold room. Say you're in an air conditioning room. So the cold air is cooling down the tea. And that air becomes itself cold because of the air conditioner. So it had the potential to be cold. And that potentiality was actualized by the air conditioner. And the air conditioner had the potential to become cold because you turned the button on. So that potentiality was actualized by you turning on the on button. And this way you can trace out, causes. And of course, Krishna is the cause of all causes. So when it comes to bhakti, we have potential for bhakti, but that potential is actualized by sadhu sangha, or by bhakti in the form of sadhu, something outside of ourselves. So if you see any bhakti is there in any person, then you must know that it must have been actualized by someone else. It doesn't just come out. So people think like that. If the bhakti is inside and at some point just come out, nope, bhakti ain't coming out. Shukadeva Goswami, he was completely out of Maya. There were no Maya. He was completely out of Maya. There were no Maya, and Shukadeva Goswami came out of the womb. But he didn't come out of the womb a bhakta. He came out of the womb an impersonalist, not a bhakta. He was self-realized. Swasukha nibrita chaitas tavyudistana bhava. Tejita ruchira lila krishna sarastadiya. He came out of the womb swasukha nibrita chaitas, absorbing the happiness of his own self. He didn't come out of the womb a bhakta. He became bhakta only when he heard Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhakti, in other words, actualized his own potential for bhakti. So if you don't know what the cause is, then it has to be assumed. So here Indra is saying, he's expressing astonishment that Maharashcharyam, but he's astonished because I accept demons can be bhaktas, but I don't know what is the cause of your great bhakti. So this is greatly astonishing that you just took birth from the fire and are devotional. Where is that coming from? And it should be assumed that it was actualized by some great bhakti. Otherwise, it is not possible to be such a great bhakta. Vasudevi Bhagavati Sattvatmani Tritamati, with fixed consciousness on the Lord having Shuddha Sattva form. Okay. Next verse. Yasya Bhakti Bhagavati Haro Nishre Yasheshware Vikridato Mritam Bodhau Kim Shudra Katakodakai. A person fixed in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord, Hari, the Lord of the highest auspiciousness, swims in the ocean of nectar. For him, what is the use of the water in small ditches? So earlier, Vitrasura has said he had no desire for Swarga, from Brahmloka, for liberation even, the happiness available in the Bilaswarga, subterranean region. So previously, Indra had doubted that because the Atmavamaya Jagat, the projection problem, he was projecting his own mentality onto Vitrasura, so he doubted that. But now he realizes he is a great bhakta. So he's affirming that by saying this, that for those who are situated in great devotion to the Supreme Lord, dear Bhagavati, the Lord Hari, who is Nishrayasa Ishvara, he is the Lord of Nishrayasa. He's the Lord of ultimate welfare, which is bhakti. Then such persons, Vikritato Amrita Amodho, they are playing around in the ocean of nectar. So, Kim Krudrai Kataka Udakai. So, what use then is there of the small ditches of water like Swargaloka? That's what he's saying. So, he's basically affirming that I didn't believe you earlier because I was projecting my own mentality. For persons like me, Swargaloka is an ocean of nectar. But for persons like you, Swargaloka is just like a small ditch of water. You don't care for such small ditches because you're swimming in the ocean of nectar that comes from devotion to the Supreme Lord. So he's affirming his belief and Vitrasura. Okay, I don't know how this is the last verse that I had planned to cover. I don't which verse number is that? Okay, there's still quite a few more verses. All right, so I'm gonna pause here. And I think the rest of the chapter is just a description of him killing Vitrasura. It took 1 year to cut off his head, but I guess we'll just finish that on Monday because I didn't read ahead. I only stopped here. Let's see if anyone wants to say anything. So witness versus identifier, right? So yeah, this is the problem that we identify. Just like sometimes they have the statement, the ego is the enemy, right? Ego is the enemy. Ego is not the enemy. If we didn't have ego, we'll be in a big problem. Just like nowadays you hear these people calling themselves trans-species, transspeciesism, complete retardation. You know, back in the 90s was like peak humanity. Back in the 90s, if you came out talking about I was trans species, they would throw you in an asylum. Like, yeah, that's where you go. That's where these certain people go. Now they actually say, yeah, that's a thing now. You could be trans species. No, you're not a trans species. You're a human. But somehow their ego has eroded to such a, because ego has a plasticity to it. Ego has a plasticity to it, right? Because we've been in so many bodies and the ego shapes itself according to the body that it's occupied or in. So the ego has plasticity to it. And so the ego has eroded so much and in this postmodern era that people don't even know if they're boy or girl, they don't know if they're human or animal, it seems. And that creates all sorts of complications for the life, as you can imagine, how complicated your life can be when you don't have a strong sense of identity. So ego is not the enemy. Identifying with the ego is the problem. So everything is coming to this identity. You need ego to navigate the world. That's necessary. Ego is the vehicle that we're using to perform sadhana bhakti and to navigate our existence. So ego is not the enemy. It gets a bad rap, but it's our identification with the ego, appropriating the ego sense to ourselves. That is the problem. So like that, yes, we are the witness, not the identifier. So when you're the witness, you have a lot more control over your inner world. And when you're the identifier, then you're controlled by the forces of nature. So that becomes a little bit problem. Okay, Shamsaki says, Rag Bhartman Chandrika, we read, bhakti is due to either God's mercy or devotee's mercy. Two kinds are mentioned, I don't think that's spelled right, praktana and adhunika, present time and past time, right? Nice. Okay, Harisham's got something it looks like, and Mukunda's got something it looks like.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this text 15 where he was talking about how those who identify with the modes of material nature are badite, they're bound. And then those who simply observe them are and as you explained, they don't experience the sufferings of the material world. This is kind of a personal question. I don't know if anybody else struggles with this, but certain
I'm
kinds
sure
of
we all do.
Okay. Yeah, probably. There's nothing unique under the sun. But like, at least looking at myself, I have this emotional investment into actions and results, right? I have this idea that if I work hard at this and this and this in my life, then eventually I will enjoy this, and this result, and I'd like those results. It's just natural. It's just how you, at least that's how I think about my life, you know. But philosophically speaking, all the suffering and happiness that is due to me is already sort of allotted in one sense. I just have to kind of go through the motions and observe myself going through the motions and experience the rewards and benefits. Like, let's say, for example, metaphorically speaking, you know, my karmic destiny is to have a 5-bedroom house. I can imagine and create in my mind a palace, but I want to end up with a 5-bedroom house. So I can just distance myself from, you know, identifying with the results of my actions and save myself a lot of suffering. But it's obviously hard to do that. But let's say we try. Let's say I'm trying now to like be more of an observer than an identifier, right? Then the question that comes up is, there's all this excess emotional energy now. Where do I invest it? And it's not my bhakti is so profound that, okay, let me invest all my like, what is it? All my, what's the word I'm looking for? All my propensity for investing myself into actions and results into my spiritual life. So let me invest my emotional energy into the actions of my sadhana and get attached to the results of my sadhana. So let's say the faith is not there yet to do that kind of investment, but there's a philosophical understanding that doing it for the material world isn't also super fruitful, you know? So what do you do with that excess emotional energy?
What's wrong with giving it to Krishna? I'm a little confused.
No, it's not wrong with it. It's just like a lack of faith, like an inability to consistently do it. That's the problem. Like not being able to do it consistently, you know?
Do more sadhu sangha and do it consistently. I mean, you know what verses come to mind are 1, 2, 9, 10. You know, everyone should study chapter 2 of the first canto repeatedly, because those are all the foundational instructions of the Bhagavatam, like the seminal teachings, the seminal questions and teachings come in the first 3 chapters, chapter 2 especially. So you know the verse, Dharmasya apavargyasya artoya, that one in the Kamashin Indriya Prita Lavojiveta Yavata. So he said Dharma is meant for apavargya. So the instruction we're hearing is that we should invest our energy in Dharma. Right? That's what we're hearing here. This kind of like, you know, the karma yogis idea is like this also. That since the results are completely out of my head, the forces of nature are acting, I have no control over that. So I need to invest my energy in with my Dharma. That Dharma is the vehicle that's carrying me through life. And if you, or you can say the boat that's helping me to cross over the ocean of life. And if you're spiritual, the ocean of material life, ultimately, it's like a boat. So you want to stay on the boat of Dharma. And if you jump outside the boat, then you get to deal with the tumultuous waters of the material energy, the material dualities. And you're just moved by that emotionally and physically. And you're just, so instead of just being moved by the waves of material nature, stay in the boat of Dharma. And part of that Dharma is learning how to be the witness. This is also the message of the karma yogi, you know, that equanimity of mind, just being the witness of things, and investing energy in the Dharma. So that's a Krishna's instruction to Arjuna. What is your Dharma? And invest all your energy there with a feeling of equanimity of mind towards the nature around you. In other words, don't step outside of that and allow that Dharma to carry you over the ocean of your life. So I imagine the emotional stuff can be invested there also, you know, and there's so many dharmas that are coming there for, you know, there's dharmas for the different phases of life, for example, and there's dharmas in terms of occupation, another example. So I feel like there's a lot to be invested in emotionally with just those two. Forget that, just those two. Dharma in the different phases of life and Dharma in the occupation of life. Varna and ashram. That's what it is. Varna, ashram, Dharma. So there's a lot to invest emotionally in that realm. And of course, Bhakti Dharma, that's what we're supposed to be all about in the Hare Krishna movement, the Bhakti Dharma. And there's plenty to invest in emotionally there also. And if we don't want to do that, okay. Well, if Krishna says, if you're not able to do that, then, you know, he said, then at least, you know, the list in chapter 12 Bhagavad Gita, at the bottom of the list, he's like, well, at least do karma yoga. He doesn't get anything outside of that, though. He's like, at least do karma yoga, you know, where you don't live for yourself, you live according to Dharma, you invest your energies there. And as you get more and more purified, you may be open to higher grace. And that may allow you to, invest all those faculties for your prayojan and your transcendental prayojan. But at least the boat of Dharma should be there. This is a boat. This is crossing over the ocean. This is my mudra for that.
Clarification.
Varna, ashram, and Dharma. Yeah.
This is a really intriguing answer. Let's say hypothetically you have a person who like has a family, children, a career, right? So then according to what you're saying, he or she would invest his energy into like how to properly maintain their career and be good at it, and then how to take care of their family and wife and all of that. But wouldn't that be, that's exactly my question is, I have the natural propensity for that. Like, let's say someday in the future, I do have a family and like an engaging career and all that, I could invest all my energy into it. But isn't that the entangling part? Isn't that yes, you could invest your energy into like doing your dharma, your varna, and your ashram well, but isn't that what entangles? And anyways,
why should it entangle?
No, my question is, even if you don't invest your emotional intensity into it, your varna and dharma are still going. Your varna and your karma are still going to produce the same material fruits that you are destined to have anyways, without the emotional investment. Like if you're gonna, like hypothetically, let's say it like this. Okay, no, never mind. That's not a good example. Okay, you go ahead. You were going to say something.
So you're saying whether I invest or not, I'll get the result, the material result. That's what you're saying.
Go through the motions. Yeah.
Whether or not I invest my emotions into the thing.
Even my dharmic obligation, like what are my dharmic obligations if I'm a grihastha, right? What are my dharmic obligations if I work for someone else as a shudra, like I'm getting a paycheck? So if I just do go through the motions of those things without too much emotional investment, I'll still get the same material results that I'm destined to get.
Okay. Yeah, true.
Yeah. So then the doubt is coming, but then where do you invest that emotion and energy? You're supposed to invest it in your dharma and your, like you're saying, your varna and your ashram. So maybe that is the way to go, which can be entangling, but at the same time, I guess you have to find a way to not let it get entangling. Is that, you see what I'm saying?
Well, it depends on what you want in life. So if you want the material result, then your emotional energy should be invested there. And your varna, ashram, and the varna, ashram, dharma. If you want the material result, then that's where, because your concern is, well, where do I put the energy if I'm just neutral? So these neutral instructions are for people who are interested in the spiritual life. And they're not interested in being carried away by dualities. So that is a karma yogi, Gyani, and Bhakta. So they're interested in the spiritual life. So these instructions are for them. So if you're not interested in that, then your emotional energy will go towards dualities, inevitably. There's no other alternative. If you're interested in the spiritual life, then you can do your Varna, Ashram, Dharma, and you invest your emotional energies in towards your prayojan. How you engage your Varna and your Ashram will be in accordance with how they support your desired goal in life. So, yeah, the Varna, Ashram, Dharma part, because you're still in the boat, but the waters are still tumultuous, so the boat is still shaky. So you have to deal with the shaky boat every now and again. Make sure the sails are properly, go downstairs, make sure all the things are in their proper place. You also have to deal with that. But the emotional energy is like, I'm going to get to the what do you call it? The seashore of my prayojan. So you're very interested in that part. And if you're not interested in that part, then these instructions are not very meaningful for such a person. They could be meaningful, but they won't be able to follow it because their prayojan is for the material thing, which comes with, dualities. Material happiness means suffering. You can't have one without the other. It's like, it's like if you marry a woman who already has kids, then you get her and her kids. You don't just get her. So if you want material happiness, you got to get the distress also. So if people are interested in that, then these instructions may not be so valuable for them. But it's for people who are interested in spiritual life.
Thank you.
Let me say they're most meaningful for the people who are interested in spiritual life. Indra obviously is interested in material life. So these sort of instructions aren't ultimately meaningful for him. but they were meaningful enough to give him the encouragement to do what he needed to do at the time of the hour, you know. Then he forgets and gets back into his materialism.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Let's see, Makunda has something, I think.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. I feel like my question, at least aspects of it, might overlap also with what Harishan was asking. But so I was just thinking about this message of Vritrasura, and he's basically saying, my understanding is that, you know, he's saying, I already know what's going to happen. I'm supposed to lose this fight, but I'm still going to do my part. So you should do your part too. And I like the sports analogy also, because I think sports is a good example, because like in a competitive, you know, in that competitive environment, like if you know you're going to lose, you still, it's extremely dishonorable to just be like, all right, if I'm already going to lose, so I'm just going to not try.
Right.
You know, that's like probably the most dishonorable thing you can do, like in a sport.
Right.
The idea is I'm still going to try my hardest, even though I know what the outcome is going to be. But I guess where my question comes in is that, you know, if we're like extrapolating that to now our real life kind of endeavors, when I'm going through some materialistic endeavors, or when I'm going through any endeavor and I know that like I'm not going to get the result that I want, then I'm trying to think how to articulate this. Basically, if I know I'm not going to get the result that I want, it's one thing to say, you know, and then if I lose, quote unquote, lose, it's one thing to say, I'm going to blame it on someone else for my loss. And it's another thing to say, it's another thing to say that this was just meant to be. But in both scenarios, there's still emotional reaction, I guess. And that seems to me that I mean, even looking at Vritrasura's, you know, activities, like he's a demon, he is acting, he has to act with passion in order to do what he does. But so he's having emotional, you know, he's exuding emotion, but it's just that he's okay with the result. So I'm thinking, like, for us, I feel like this could maybe incorrectly be translated as you should not have emotion and you should be okay with the result. But I think, and that's where I'm at, this is my question, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like what it is showing is that it is okay to have emotion, but you should be okay with the result. You know, you see the difference, like, versus not okay to have emotion and you have to be okay with the result, versus it is okay to have emotion, but you still have to be okay with the result.
Yeah. I think that was very well articulated. I think it's very insightful contribution to the discussion. Yeah, saying with an equal eye is the function of the intelligence. So when Krishna speaks about this in the Gita, he speaks about it in the context of Buddhi Yoga. Right? This is the function of the intelligence, to be able to discern between, you know, what is substantial, what is peripheral, what is duality, and what is the unmoving soul, and so on. This function of the intelligence, and the emotions are more closely related to the manas aspect of the psyche. So that manas part, you'll not be able to stop, because the manas part is already fixed, as Krishna says in Gita, Raga Dvesha. What is that verse? Vyavastito, 334 Bhagavad Gita. I'm forgetting the verse now. Raga Dvesha, no, not Raga Dvesha, Vivutesha. Indriyas Indriyas Raga Dvesha Vyavastito. Tayor Avasham Agachet. Something. Last line, I'm forgetting. My shlokas are, this happens with the old age. So anyway, he says that the raga and dvesha are fixed in the senses and in the psyche. So emotional responses are kind of already pre-programmed. You know, that's part of our karmic destiny. So we're already predisposed to emotionally respond in a very particular way to particular circumstances. And if we allow ourselves to, what Krishna says, Tayor Avasham Akacha, do not come under the control of that. And do not come under the control of it, because that is a stumbling block to spiritual progress. So the not feeling stuff is not going to be possible, but the not coming under the control of that is possible. And that's going to require, obviously, a sharp and discerning intelligence that allows us to do that. So with the discerning intelligence, we try to see equally. So we are feeling the feels, we have all sorts of feelings, but then we allow that to be analyzed from the perspective of the higher part of our psyche, the intelligence part. And so obviously Richard Storer was very emotional, actually. He expressed it. He was like this sort of like weird laughing and lamentation thing. Like I was like really picturing that. I'm like, that must have been mad scary, you know, like a joke,
insane, like insanity, like
like a Joker situation, you know, where he's like lamenting about them, like he's laughing. So he's always very emotional. He really wants to leave his body because it's an obstacle to his seva. So it's quite emotional, actually. But he begins to find that Indra gets, you know, defeated. He gets morose. And so he's like, listen, bro, don't come under the control of that emotional state. You know, we're not in control of this stuff. We're like play things in the hands of God, blah, blah. Just, you know, allow yourself to see it that way. Even though you're feeling it one way, allow yourself to see it this way. And that way, give up your moroseness and carry on. And let the fruit be what the fruit's going to be. That's beyond our control. So yeah, you're correct. I think the Stoic message, and that's how a lot of people thought of Stoicism also. They thought, you know, that first of all, especially feminist women of the postmodern era, they take Stoicism as one of the toxic qualities of men, one of their toxic masculinity, Stoicism. It was like, used to be like one of the outstanding qualities, but because Stoicism was kind of translated as like non-emotion. But it's not non-emotion. It's putting your emotions, it's investing your emotions where you can actually do something. Don't invest your emotions in that which is beyond your control, but invest your emotions in that which is within your control. And that's basically how you respond. And within that, there may be a few things you can do with any given circumstance, one or two things. You don't have like a plethora of responses, like actual responses, like two choices you can do in any given circumstance. And you have full control over how you respond. But to assert that control internally takes a lot of work. So it may often translate to people as like a sort of non-emotive, sort of like emptiness or blankness, because it takes a lot of force to get your emotion, your inner world to like in order, so it doesn't sabotage your life and sabotage your, you know, your opportunity for progressive movement. And so maybe it often is translated as non-emotive just because that's how it looks from a third party looking at someone. But it's not non-emotion. It's like, no, I have to invest my emotions in where I actually have power and control. And that's mostly in how I shape my inner world. And then the couple actions I can do in a practical way. So yeah, it's not non-emotion, but it's looking with an equal eye. So yeah. I think that's a very nice contribution, subtlety that you bring up.
Yeah, and one thing I was also thinking that I feel like one thing that most devotees do very well, you know, even very imperfect devotees, is when some reversal happens in their life, they don't, I mean, I don't believe that they blame Krishna or some other, I mean, they may be like pointing at other people in the scenario and saying like, you did this to me, this is your fault. But any devotee that's still around is still around because they don't blame Krishna, which is in my eyes like beautiful, because that's what very like immature people do, is blame God. Right. I you know, ultimately. And so, you know, when we go through our emotional states, obviously the next level is to also not blame other people or other souls, but it is a level of accomplishment, I think, to not be blaming God for the reversals in our lives. So something to be proud of, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point. Shamsaki says, in the beginning of class, you mentioned soul not composed of modes of sattva, rajas, or tamas. Can we say it's composed of shuddha sattva? No. It's not. Shuddha sattva is another phrase for the internal energy. So the jiva is a tashta shakti. So it's a shakti that is a distinct category of its own. So it's neither the internal energy, which the term shuddha sattva is used to refer to, neither is it the external energy or maya shakti, composed of the gunas of prakriti. So it's in its own category, conscious shakti of the Lord. Okay, anything else anyone wants to say? Okie dokes. Well, maybe we can pause there then. Hari Om Tat Sat. Thanks a lot. Have a good weekend, everyone. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Go Permanente. Hari
Thanks.
Hari Bolo.
Hare Krishna, thank you.